Michelle Leivan here with my Encounters Alla Prima project, and I'm here with Barbara Waterman-Peters, a core artist in the NOTO Arts District. Barbara paints portraits just like I've been doing, although she does very realistic portraits.
I think that I should go way back to my childhood and talk about the fact that I had an early fascination with the human face, with the human figure, and I've drawn them since I was a child. As a very young woman, after having gone to college and studied the figure and working from models, I used to do little charcoal sketches at art fairs and so forth. I charged, I don't know, anywhere from $7 to $10 for them. By the end of the day, I was exhausted having done them all day. I had a line forming. My one really interesting experience was with an older woman who was disappointed that her portrait wasn't quite as nice as that 20-year-old's who had sat just before her. And it was difficult to explain why that would have been. But that led to working on portraits in oil. I had an interesting experience one time. A young couple was planning to get married, and he wanted to have portraits of each one of them. And I did his, and it went well. Then he sent his young fiancée in. Time passed. We talked. I had nothing. I could not get even a contour of her. I'd put a line down and I would obliterate it, put another line down. I mean, this went on for probably 30 minutes. I had never had this kind of experience before. So I finally looked at her and I said, "You do not want your portrait done, do you?" And she looked relieved, and she smiled and said, "No, I really don't." I said, "Well, I have not been able to get one." So I knew that there was something wrong. So let's not do it, because I can't get anything. There was an invisible barrier. So portrait painting is a relationship between the painter, the artist, and the sitter. There has to be a mutual trust and a mutual desire for this to happen, or it won't. It's a very, very interesting dynamic. Recently, I completed a portrait of Martini. When we invited her to my studio, Studio 831, and a group of us were working with her, to watch her was absolutely a hoot. She'd sit on the edge of her chair and her eyes would sparkle and she'd look at each one of us and it was absolutely a delight. And I did finally get a wonderful portrait. I took many photos of her. I did some sketches. I did little watercolors, but I took some photos and finally decided on the one I liked best. And I worked on it a long time because I've known Martini for years, and I wanted to really capture her. I think that almost without conscious thought, it has occurred to me that an interesting project would be to portray powerful, interesting women in this area. There are some women that I would really, really like to do, women who have affected change and have been active and been part of the community in a really, really positive way, and are in and of themselves interesting. And any time you depict the human figure, there's a narrative. But even if there is no accompanying literal narrative, the viewer tends to find one. Who is this person? Why have they been painted? When you depict the human figure in whatever way, you are telling a story whether you want to or not. There's no avoiding it. I don't care how cold or how disinterested or impersonal you try to be as the artist. It's still in there, and there's no way around it. As an artist, you are a communicator, and using the human face as a starting point is a wonderful sense of connection, because there's the artist and then that person in the portrait, and then the person who's looking at it, the viewer. And so there's this whole conversation going on. There are only two people standing there, or maybe there's only one person standing there, but the artist is there by default, and the canvas with its human presence is there literally, but although the person isn't. And so there is this great conversation going on, even if the viewer has never looked at a piece of art before. They're still engaged in spite of themselves.